Back to another edition of the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rych. We have a very special show tonight. We have Terry Almanza, and hopefully Laura Gallagher will be coming on to join us soon. And I'm not going to give it any sort of like a presentation. I promoted it enough. Everybody knows what this is about. Terry, why don't you tell us about your organization? And I have it here. Boom. Drug Induced Homicide Foundation, which you founded and you chair. Why don't you tell us about that, and then maybe from that, tell us why you started this organization.
Absolutely. So Drug Induced Homicide Foundation was founded back in 2015. It is a nationwide organization that supports, advocates for justice in the lethal poisonings of our loved ones. In Illinois, we have a statute called the Drug Induced Homicide Criminal Statute. It is a very simple statute that reads, the unlawful delivery of a controlled substance resulting in a death. If a person delivers an illicit substance to another and that person dies, in Illinois, as of 1989, you can be charged with drug-induced homicide. It's a Class X felony, sentence punishable up to 30 years in prison. But sadly, in Illinois, it is rarely enforced. Sadly, truthfully, when I started back in 2015, prosecuting these cases was very rare. At the time, I was a Chicago police officer serving in gang investigations. Sadly, my daughter, 18 years old, Sydney, she ingested a lethal dose of MDMA. Didn't know what she was doing, young kid, out with friends, had shared, hey, take this, experimenting. She was a standout athlete, volleyball player, going off to, continue her volleyball career, just signed a collegiate scholarship, graduated from Queen of Peace High School. Jeez. And made a really bad choice, and it cost her life. So the Chicago Police Department responded. Initially, they were great. I think part of the Blue Brotherhood, we look out for each other. We take care of each other. We're a family. They become, you work alongside these people, and, we become very close knit, and they were great. When Sydney passed, as well as the fire department. My husband retired from the fire department as a lieutenant, and our CFD and CPD family were great. But immediately following her homicide, CPD indicated that they were not going to investigate her death criminally, and that Sydney made a choice, and the case was classified as non-criminal and closed.
Wow.
And at that point, I had never heard of drug-induced homicide. I had, I think, about 25 years on the job, and I had never heard of a drug-induced homicide. And I guess because we weren't prosecuting it. But after doing much research, I knew that what took place was criminal, but had never heard of, the drug-induced homicide statute. So did a lot of investigations, and spoke with Will County, Lake County, McHenry County is currently leading Illinois in these prosecutions, and spoke with them and found out that they were having great success investigating these cases and, sending these dealers to jail. So I really pushed with the Chicago Police Department to do the same. They opened Sydney's case back up months later, and worked very hard to, prosecute the two people that were responsible for delivering her that lethal dose. I knew the day she died who was responsible, but had to wait. I think it was about 17 months before those dealers were brought in and questioned, and both admitted to selling Sydney a lethal dose of MDMA, and then eventually convicted of her homicide. And one was sadly given 6 months probation Cynthia Parker was a juvenile at the time of Sydney's homicide, so she was given 1 year probation, which was a slap in the face to our family, to Sydney. And the adult that was convicted, Brent Tyson, was given 6 years in prison. But the saddest part, while they were fighting the case prior to being convicted, they both went out and sold again MDMA in it was in Orland Park, and they were charged with selling felony weight. So these people don't stop, and so this is truly not about being vindictive or bringing Sydney back or a happy ending. There's no happy ending for our family. Our daughter's gone. May coming up is the hardest time for us. Her birthday, the anniversary of her passing, Mother's Day, bereaved Mother's Day. Our 2 other children, their birthdays, she will not be here. So, this is about sending a message to these drug dealers that you can't be peddling this poison and take lives and walk away with zero accountability. There has to be some justice. So, we've really, from back in 2015, nearly 8 years ago, to these cases being closed, to now the Chicago Police Department implementing a protocol to ensure that these cases are investigated criminally. And myself and other mothers have been invited to the police academy to share our stories with newly promoted Chicago police detectives, to ensure that these cases are taken seriously and that there is a shift within our judicial system away from accidental to now criminal. So we've come a long way. I like you said, this is always such a difficult topic for any parent, to speak of, but it's such an important topic. And if sharing this message can save one life, then that's how we honor Sid. And there's so many other lives lost.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because, like you said, that's got to be the most awful thing in the world to go through. Yeah. This is how you can check out her foundation and get involved. www.druginducedhomicide.org. Well, thank you because that takes a great deal of courage and strength to persist in this sort of manner, because you're constantly having to remember, right? I mean, and that's just got to be very, very difficult.
And fight for something, I think I'll always say, there's nothing worse in life than to bury a child.
Right. It's supposed to be the worst thing ever.
It's against the natural order. You're not supposed to bury your children.
Right.
And then during the, most, painful time of your life, to then be pleading with our judicial system to investigate, their death, is just so cruel, So,
can I ask you some questions about that?
Sure.
That this sort of like lackadaisical, this laziness towards the application of this law. First of all, was it a law and they just didn't seem to care, or were there just sort of like loopholes in each case that they got through?
Well, I think in years past, we just there was a criminal statute since 1989 saying that, hey, you give someone an illicit drug and they die, that's a homicide. But it just was never enforced.
But why? I mean, I don't understand. Like, I'm not saying, obviously the governments, local, state, federal, do this stuff all the time. The lack of application of laws, which just sort of renders like written law useless if you're not going to apply it.
Absolutely.
And that's supposed to be what binds us together as a society, is written law, well, amongst other things. But I mean, and then it comes to like cherry picking and favoritism and all sorts of bias and discrimination. A whole can of worms opens up, and when you find out about things like this, and so like, what was there? Did you ever ask anybody like, why wouldn't you do this? I mean, and did you get an answer?
And I think we people will say that often, well, because you're a Chicago police officer, that's why you got justice. Absolutely not. I got justice because I fought real hard for it, for what we deserve, what our family deserved, what Sydney deserved. We deserve those answers. We deserve that closure. Those dealers deserved that accountability, that you're not going to take a life and walk away, with no consequence. I mean, if her bike was stolen, it would have been, taken more seriously.
Yeah.
So, honestly, I believe there are a number of reasons. I believe because of the stigma tied to drug use, that our children are oftentimes looked at throwaways. I've had people say the most horrific things that, we're weeding out the weak. Sydney had a very hard life. She was only 18. When she was 3 years old, she lost her beautiful mother, Sherry, to pancreatic cancer. She was just a baby. I remember talking to Sid and Sydney not having any memory of her mother and other than pictures. And I can't imagine that as a child. And then when Sydney was 4 and 5 years old, she was sexually assaulted by her 35-year-old cousin, who we believe, as my husband's out at the firehouse and, family is babysitting and taking care of, my husband's children, that the cousin is coming in and taking advantage of a poor child. And so, people don't take the time to understand why, would somebody be experimenting? Why are people struggling with addiction? Why is this happening? Why is this the leading cause of death in Americans 18 to 45? We just had a 12-year-old in Chicago poisoned by 2 different types of fentanyl in August at 105th and Lafayette, 12 years old. How did that happen? What do you mean we're not, investigating, So I think the stigma tied to addiction, tied to drug use. I think that the crime in Chicago makes it difficult for, the caseload, but sadly, I believe it was a little bit over 800, maybe 815 or 16 gun-related homicides in Cook County in 2022, where in Cook County in 2022, there were 1,993 opioid-related deaths. So it's double. But yet, since Sydney passed away, we're over 9,000 lives lost to opioid poisoning since 2014 in Cook County. And only 8 cases have resulted.
That's just in Cook County.
That's just in Cook County.
That's not even national.
Over 9,000. And only of those 9,000, only 8 cases resulted in a drug-induced homicide charge, not a conviction, a charge. In McHenry County, Patrick Keneally, who is, leading Illinois in prosecuting these cases, I believe has 81, I believe it is, drug-induced homicide charges. So, I think it's the stigma. I think it's the manpower. I think it's people, families, struggle to speak up and fight. I think being a law enforcement officer, I just knew like what took place wasn't right and that I wasn't going to go away, and it honestly, next to burying Sydney, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And so that is why the foundation started, because I believe, or I think that I need to help families, give them that voice. And, there's so many families that just believe, well, my kid made a choice and end of story. No, Sydney didn't choose to die. These kids aren't choosing, to ingest fentanyl. Most of these kids think they're taking a Percocet or a Xanax. There's kids that are taking Adderall and it's pure fentanyl. So,
interesting. Okay.
It's not, these are not overdoses. These are poisonings, it's, an overdose is when someone ingests too much of a recommended dosage. It's not an illicit drug. What is the recommended dosage of MDMA?
What is MDMA? Is that fentanyl?
Ecstasy.
Ecstasy. Okay.
It's a club drug,
Right.
and Sydney thought, if I had $1 for every law enforcement officer that I talked to that said, you can't die from MDMA, or
I've
that
never heard of that either. Yeah. Okay.
or just what they would say to me, well, what was it laced with? Nothing. It was pure MDMA.
Interesting. Yeah. I never heard of that happening, but
So
okay.
if you have a law enforcement officer that doesn't know, how can we expect our kids, to know better, and we had these talks, but she thought, she trusted the wrong person, and she thought that, she'd be okay, and she wasn't. So,
Was Cynthia and Brink? Is that his name?
so it's Cynthia Parker was the one defendant, and then the second defendant was Brent Tyson.
Brent.
Yeah.
Were they friends of hers, or just people at the club that night, or were they gangbangers? Or
Cynthia Parker was actually Sydney's cousin.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was really tough. To know that
Yeah.
to know that her cousin knew Sydney's struggles, and those are some things that came out during the court proceedings, that they knew that Sid was struggling. And that actually her cousin, had told her, here, take this, it'll help kind of numb the pain, and they did. They silenced her forever, so, and so many people will message me and they'll say, like, my daughter died, my son died, they were given this by a friend. Those aren't your friends, these are not their friends, friends don't give friends drugs, so yeah, like I said, the one defendant was sentenced to 6 years, and the other one was given a year probation. And I, quite honestly, the worst scenario in this was that the 3 lives were lost. And I really hope that the one, his incarceration, and I don't know about the cousin. I don't know anything, her direction or where she is in life, but I hope that they get their lives straight. And I hope that they, are able to rehabilitate and be, all the things that they took from Sydney, and our family. So this is not about, like I said, this vengeance. It's not. There's so many people that I have come in contact with that have children that are in active addiction. And the thing that did turn their lives around was, incarceration, so there has to be consequences. Absolutely.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, within any social organization, any society, you need accountability.
Yeah.
But we talked about this on the phone before. One of the reasons I don't understand why this isn't more of a thing legally is that as I was a bartender for a long time, and if I overserve somebody and let them drive home and they got into an accident and killed somebody, I am partially responsible as a bartender. You're damn skippy, I am.
And alcohol is legal.
Perfectly legal. Right, okay. I don't know the extent to which I would have been held accountable, but there is legal implications for that, for sure. I've heard about it. Other bartenders like getting arrested, and again, I don't know what happened to them after that, but they were definitely charged with something. But so to think that that somebody can do the same sort of thing and not be held accountable, it just baffles me. Like, first of all, dealing drugs is illegal, right? If it's not, something like MDMA, fentanyl is a prescription drug, so obviously you can get it from your doctor. It's not illegal, but they're shipping it in over the borders and
the stuff that's coming over the borders is not, that is an illicit fentanyl. Right. That's two different things. Absolutely.
Yeah, but even like some, and I'm thinking too, like Michael Jackson died of a fentanyl overdose that was given to him by his doctor, and his doctor got into trouble. I think he went to jail for some time. Prince, the same thing happened. I don't know what happened to Prince's doctor, but so there has been accountability even with the non-illicit form of fentanyl from a very legal doctor. Absolutely. Because you gave him too much, didn't instruct him correctly, and it ended his life. Whatever the case was, I don't know the details, but
I think it weighs very heavily on Like I'll often have people say to me, well, it's the police, it's, it's the detective or whatever. In my
What does that
experience,
mean?
in my experience being a law enforcement officer, there were a lot of things that I didn't like to do, but if my supervisor said, hey, you know what, we're going down to, downtown and, we're going to be standing there all day and we're expecting, problems and blah, 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 I'm doing it, So regardless of what an officer's opinion is on these cases, if the detective division, if you're the superintendent, if there is the mayor, the state's attorney, if there is a statute and there is a protocol put in place that says, hey, and this is what Patrick Keneally does in McHenry County, which is another reason that I just, I'm so thankful for him leading the way in Illinois, where Kim Fox has said, hey, well, it's not that we have a policy against these cases. It's just that the Chicago Police Department doesn't present these cases to us. So there's her out, where McHenry County says, hey, anytime we have a suspected drug toxicity death, officers are to notify my office, and we will send a state's attorney to the scene. And we will say, okay, take that phone, inventory those narcotics, talk to these people, preserve the social media accounts. In so many of these cases, the evidence is in the phone, the last text message, the last call. These cases, are not difficult cases to prove, like so many say. The phones are just a treasure trove of evidence. But if you don't take the phones, if you don't talk to people, if you don't preserve their social media accounts, to take those steps, and you just close the case or you just wait, and another problem is the toxicology. Oftentimes these toxicologies are not coming back for 2 months. And so in the interim, the case just sits there cold. No, if it's a suspected drug toxicity death, investigate it, start doing, the things that you need to do to investigate, to make sure that, when the time comes and that toxicology comes back as a poisoning, that, yeah, you've preserved that social media account, you've gotten those banking apps to show that transaction that took place. So, I truly believe that, it really has to do with the department, the state's attorney, families, pushing for an investigation, ensuring that there is justice. And again, it's not so much about the victim any longer. They're gone. There's no happy ending for Sydney, for us. But if doing what we are doing can stop, one dealer, one victim from thinking twice, that's why we do what we do. We don't want anyone to feel the pain, that we endure on a daily basis. It'll be 8 years and every day is still tough, So this is about, ensuring that this doesn't happen again, so.
Well, when they decided not to prosecute Cynthia and Brent for Sydney's passing, did they still go after them for being drug dealers at all?
No.
I mean, nothing?
No, they didn't take Sydney's phone. They didn't search her room. They didn't subpoena her social media, or her call log. I mean, it was easy. I went on my AT&T bill and I saw, okay, Sydney talked to Cynthia Parker at this time. So it wasn't difficult. And I conveyed to them, I shared with them all the evidence that I had, and they closed her case immediately.
Wow.
And so that was the end of May. I believe that her case was not reopened again until January. And that was only because I refused to be silenced. I went to the media. We went out and we did rallies. We stood out in front of the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. We stood out in front of the Cook County Courthouse. We stood outside the Chicago Police Department. I became very vocal. That here you have this beautiful 18-year-old girl and her life is gone, and and we're just gonna classify that as non-criminal. Um, so it wasn't easy, and it's heartbreaking because there's so many moms and dads and grandmas and siblings that have come out to the rallies, Laura Gallagher's family being one,
Yeah.
and never got any justice, never got any closure. The persons responsible were never charged. And I, felt that the case was very strong. But, we have families that are contacting detectives and they're not calling them back. Saying that there's not enough information. We had, a family that shared with me that, no, we don't investigate, these types of deaths. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you're a detective on the, police department and you don't even know about the statute, So again, and I think because families are just so shattered and broken, it's really hard to, trump up that strength to just sometimes get out of bed, much less,
Oh, yeah.
go and beg and plead with law enforcement and be dismissed or turned away. Um, so, like I said, of the 9,000 in Cook County, and I've met, a lot of families, only 8 cases resulted in charges. So, a lot of families get discouraged and they go away. And I sometimes think that our judicial system, you know, um, that they bank on that, this family member is not going to fight, I have family members that will reach out to me and say, I haven't heard from the detective. We'll call him. And if he doesn't call you, then go to the police department and, and be respectful. I love the police. I'm a 28-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. I've got nothing but admiration for law enforcement officers, for our judicial system. But sadly, in this department, they have failed us. And I'm thankful for Chicago Police Detective Chief Deanahan, who is now retired, who did implement a new policy so detectives, would have the tools to know how to investigate these cases criminally, and then implement some training as well. But he is now gone. So I hope that the new chief steps up. But I've sent this policy to other chiefs of police, to prosecutors, and some I get a response, but most I don't. So.
And you think some of that might be just because of manpower and just not able to get to the prioritize, make it a less of a priority of a case because they're just overwhelmed with other stuff that they feel is more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to just go through like the reasoning of like, well, she made a choice, and how somehow choice is the one thing that holds you accountable for your behavior. Yes, we know that. I mean, just morally speaking, you have free will, you have the ability to reason. If you make a choice, it's kind of on you. But I mean, legally, and again, socially, that's not how it ever plays out. And I'm thinking to myself, like just a hypothetical situation. If I know that my friend of mine is suicidal, and I invite him over and I leave a gun on the table, and I go into the other room and he shoots himself, you think the law's not going to hold me accountable for that?
Or what about the the 14-year-old kid who's running with gangs, and when he's out there, doing what he shouldn't do, and maybe even toting a gun, and he's shot and killed. Is he less a victim? Does that person behind that other firearm, get to walk away without any accountability because the victim, made a bad choice? He never, chose to. I mean, and I don't know how many, I retired from gang investigations, so I responded to many gang shootings, many homicides, and we investigated them. There was no, hey, this is non-criminal because your kid, was engaging in criminal activity. Am I angry with Sydney? Yeah, I'm angry with Sid. I'm really angry. I'm sad. That that this happened to our child, but she didn't deserve to die.
Right.
Kids make mistakes every day. They're not supposed to die from them. They're supposed to learn from them. So if there is going to be that type of consequence for my kid, there better be some consequence for the person that sold her that poison. Absolutely.
Yeah, and speaking of gangs, and you would know firsthand about one of the primary functions of a gang is to sell drugs, right?
Guns and drugs. Yeah.
Guns and drugs, right? Exactly. And I just do you think if Cynthia and Brent were gangbangers that it would have been taken more seriously?
Absolutely not. No.
No. Okay. Oh,
It
really?
just, it just was a matter of, I mean, so another case that I had assisted on prior to my retirement, I remember contacting the detective and saying, "Hey, the victim," because I have lots of family members reaching out to me, and so I had a family reach out to me in Chicago and say, "Hey, this is what happened to my son, and there's narcotics on the scene. There's a needle on the scene. There's a diary, a journal on the scene with banking information of the dealer and the dealer's information and the phone, and in the phone was unlocked, and the details of the um, you know transaction. And I remember calling the detective, and he kind of not he kind of he laughed, and he said, "Well, why would you want to inventory that?" And I said, "Because I'd like to ensure that this guy, is investigated and, hopefully charged with drug-induced homicide." And he kind of laughed, and I know that it was not out of, this disrespect. It was just, that's not our protocol. That's not what we do. We always, take, because in past protocol, the Chicago Police Department would just classify these as death investigations. They were not classified as homicides. And so they were immediately passed over to a particular detective that handled deaths of elderly people. And they would handle overdoses, which I'm not a fan of that word. Um, and they were just closed and not investigated criminally. And so he's like, if you want to take the phone and you want to, go and inventory it, by all means, go ahead. And that's what I did. And I'm really proud to say that the dealer, Joshua Bloomfield, was convicted of his homicide, and that happened back in Chicago. And so it's sad. I think the bulk of investigations, that were ever pushed anywhere were because I was supporting the families, because I was pushing the Chicago Police Department. Hey, this is not right, and I mean, there are many other families that I have, come in contact with in Chicago and Cook County and all over the US, where I've tried to, be of support to families, to give them the guidance, to know what to say, to officers and, detectives and, our prosecutors, to ensure that these cases are investigated criminally. And it like I said, if there's no protocol, they are just seen as a death investigation and classified as non-criminal. Sydney's case was classified as a non-criminal death investigation, and it would have stayed that way, and there would have never been an investigation had I not fought the way that I did. And that's a problem. Families
Oh, yeah.
grieving, families should be there for their children, for their spouses, should be taking care of themselves, not educating themselves as to what the criminal statute is. And oh my gosh, let me see, what if we have any video surveillance, or let me check my kid's phone record to see who may be the source of this unlawful delivery.
Yeah, you'd think you want the local police department to know who the drug dealers are, right? Keep it
Absolutely.
on record for, like, when they do get busted for the next time. Oh, by the way, here's another count.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, and it's also like making me think of, and I'm not offering a solution to this because I don't have one, but like the school shootings, and like the government seems to be doing like absolutely nothing at all.
Mhm.
You know, and I mean, I'm not suggesting we need to take away. I don't know I don't know how to fix it, but it's not. They need to do something for God's sakes, and they're doing nothing.
Absolutely.
And
Mhm.
people are losing their children, little children, and stuff like that, to the most horrifying of ways. And it is unfortunate that we have to just keep badgering our government to do something.
Mhm.
That happens a lot,
Mhm.
in a lot of different ways.
Especially when it comes to our children.
Yeah.
That should be a no-brainer, we should
It
be
should be a no-brainer. You're right.
we
Children are the huge exception to all these things. Uh, when you start, you can do something to an adult, you do that same thing to a child. It seems to be a very different story for a lot of people,
Mhm.
um, and just psychologically and culturally. And rightly so. Children are far more vulnerable. Part of the definition of being a child is that you don't have the strength to stand up for yourself. Uh,
Young and dumb, with they may like I said, our
yeah,
children, they make mistakes, and we expect them to learn from them, and things are so much different now than when we were younger. And when
oh
you
yeah,
read about all these lives being lost to this fentanyl, and all these other drugs that are this crank, and this that just the smallest amount is so lethal. We had just had a mom on our page share that she believes her 16-year-old in Algonquin, Illinois, um, died from a lethal dose of fentanyl that was found on marijuana. The toxicology has not come back, but I guess based on what was found in the bedroom, that's what they're thinking, and they're putting it in everything, and it's very scary. It's very frightening.
that is very scary. And especially with like marijuana being legal now in Illinois, you can get safe product from dispensaries, and you don't even need the Black Street version. Black Street, the black market version of marijuana is still as much dangerous as it ever has been because it's not regulated.
Mhm,
So like, I mean, if you want to smoke pot, just go to a dispensary. Well, yeah, first of all, you have to be 21. Go to a dispensary and buy it because it's guaranteed to be safe.
mhm, mhm,
And then go home. Don't smoke and driving. Go home, have your fun, whatever. Same thing with alcohol.
mhm.
And alcohol is 1,000 times worse than marijuana could ever be. Do you think that? And I don't want to politicize this. I really don't. But this kind of popped in my head. Do you think that like before pot became legal, that maybe there was so much emphasis on kind of nabbing people for having that over the harder stuff, and that might have like drawn the attentions away just because pot has this like again like a stigma? Do you think that's scary or no?
Um,
I mean, there are people still in jail for having possessing pot in like the 90s.
um, I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a huge, not a huge fan of smoking pot, of any of it. Like, I don't know. I just feel that, I guess if you are able to, do that, safely, but I think that there's so many, especially even like with our youth, that are struggling, whether it was COVID and all these kids are in the house. And so all they've got is social media. And so they're jumping on TikTok and they're seeing this, or they're listening to music, and the music talks about popping, perks, and,
Right.
that, so I don't, I don't like any of that at all. But I know that there are, a lot of people that can use it, and recreationally and safely.
Mhm.
But I just, I think, with Sydney's situation, Sydney had been struggling, with some emotional
Yeah.
things,
Oh,
and so I
sounds
just, I worried a lot with her, using anything at all, because I felt as if that was just not a good way to deal with her trauma,
right.
and would only lead into far worse. And it did.
Right. What sort of reception has your foundation got publicly? Like, obviously, it's doing a lot of good, clearly, but I mean, have you had any opportunities to talk about it on a bigger news source than the Illinois Green Party series or anything like that? Is it getting the attention of people?
Yeah, we've been on Fox News. We've been on Fox Nation. Um,
Oh, okay.
or I personally have, and our other parents have as well. I've been on, every news channel in Chicago. They've come out to our rallies. Um, I don't know. I guess I'm sure some people would feel as if, I'm giving, the Chicago Police Department a hard time, and that's quite honestly the last thing that I want to do. We need their support. We need, their partnership. But I feel that, that I do need to put that pressure, on them to ensure that, that protocol is, followed, and that's the statute is, pushed as well within our judicial system. So, from going to Sydney's case being, non-criminal, and closed, to now, assisting the Chicago Police Department writing the new special order on the drug-induced homicide investigations, as well as, being invited down to the Chicago Police Academy to give those trainings to newly promoted detectives. That's, I feel that, was a huge, progress for our foundation. We have, we've partnered with, we have a Facebook page, Drug Induced Homicide Foundation. It's a public page, over 11,000 followers. We've partnered with various law enforcement agencies, state's attorneys. The president of the foundation is out in California, Matt Capilouto, and they've done amazing work. They do not have a criminal statute out there. They are working on passing a bill called Alexandra's Law, to just, it's kind of sad. They do not have a criminal statute to investigate these cases criminally. They have a statute, and I'm not super duper versed on it because this is their baby. But they have a statute out there, or a bill out there with drunk driving. And so if you are involved in a drunk driving incident, you are given a warning by law enforcement. If you do it again, if you're involved in another incident, you can then be charged with drunk driving. So the Alexandra's Law is kind of similar to that, to where if you are caught in California with an illicit drug, they give you this warning. If you then are involved in another incident which involves a death, you can then be charged with that homicide, because you now know, you've been advised that selling drugs, which I don't know why we need a warning. We should know that, selling any type of an illicit narcotic could result in someone's death. But so Alexandra's Law is going, I believe, tomorrow in front of the state reps and stuff to try to push it through and get it passed. So we have chapters in every state. We are invited to, there's another foundation called Lost Voices of Fentanyl. They're a great organization, and they have a rally every year down by the White House. So we participate in those events. But yeah, we've come a long way.
That's extremely impressive. Well, hello, Laura.
Hello.
She was texting the whole time. Laura is an ER doctor in Chicago.
Nurse.
Sorry. ER nurse in Chicago Hospital. And so there's nothing to, you can't wave a stick at that one, because that's tough stuff there. So she was actually giving me updates. She had a cardiac arrest she was dealing with. She's now in her car driving home. So, well, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's nice to see you.
You too.
Thank you. So Laura and I actually went to high school together, graduated the same year. also with her twin sister, of course. And I remember the day that I saw the post on Facebook when Laura first discussed what happened to her, and it absolutely just devastated me. It was absolutely broke my heart. And so I just want to say a very sincere apology to both of you that this happened. It's unfortunate that we have to have this conversation, but like you said, Terry, it's important that we do. Laura, are you up for sharing your story, or do you want to talk about something else?
No, I mean, it's fine. I can tell you my story.
Okay.
My son Liam was 22, almost 23, and he had been on and off for about a year and a half abusing Xanax. I mean, he would smoke pot here and there. It's kind of where it started, and then some. I found mushrooms once, and he was my smartest, really smart kid. I think he just wasn't maybe challenged enough in the Catholic schools when, I don't know, it started in high school with the smoking weed and all that. But he was okay in that he didn't hit the Xanax until about a year and a half before, and I had him in rehab 3 times, and sober living for 8 months the last time. And he was doing great. I was so proud of him, and finally came home from sober living, got a job, and I don't really know what triggered him, but it was my daughter who actually said that, Mom, I think Liam's taking the Xanax again because he was, like really hard to wake up and per se, just like zombies is the only way I can describe it when they're on that much benzodiazepine. And then something triggered a relapse, and I told him, you're gonna die. I was hysterical. I go, you're gonna die. I see it every day. You're gonna die. It's gonna kill you. You're gonna get poisoned. But he's like, Mom, I would never try anything stronger. Blah blah blah. So that one night, apparently, the police, when they saw his phone, said that your son looks like he tried heroin for the first time that night, and it was fentanyl laced, and it killed him. I stayed up. We had stayed up, and I said, "Don't do anything stupid tonight." And then my ex-husband, husband at the time, called, yelled up the stairs when he came home from off shift. He's a Chicago firefighter, and he yelled upstairs, and I just knew. I just felt it, and I ran down the stairs, which felt like I was floating, and there he was, sitting the same way I left him. He had his laptop in his lap. He was doing his fantasy football team. Re-registered, get 3 years of college done, re-registered to start again, and he was gone. And I had my daughter call 911. I wouldn't let her come in the living room, though. I didn't want her to see her brother like that. It's bad enough just to know that he's dead. She was 17, almost 17 at the time. And 911 made me do CPR, so my husband dragged him on the floor, and I did CPR. And the most vivid memory is I just have my tears all over him, his face, and his neck, just crying. And it just was surreal. The scream that comes out, and I hear it at work for years. Terry's heard it. It's uttered from her. This sound that comes from your soul of this utter and complete loss of losing your child.
Yeah.
And it just destroyed us. Destroyed everything, my marriage, everything. It just, I met Terry through a mutual friend who's a Chicago police officer who connected her to me the night my son died through Facebook. So when Terry came into my life and told me about her daughter and their story and her struggle to even have justice for her own daughter in being on the police department because there were no protocols in place. So she was able to help me a lot with, getting things taken care of the right way, getting, the cell phone, which has a plethora of information on, because that's how they get their drugs. And help me get that, taken care of, taken down to the right people where it could be analyzed. But I know there was probably a lot of information. I couldn't get records of it, but right away, my detective, I couldn't even get a hold of him. He would never call back, and he just like, I understand. I had a 20-something-year-old, and that's not any consolation for losing your child. And finally, the only way I could get a hold of him at one point, I actually called a friend of mine who was a retired, but at the time he was still working, captain in 14th district, where I'm sorry, the 10th district, and he called the detective, and the detective called me immediately, and that was Christmas Day. And then he just wouldn't return my emails or anything, and then he finally called me and said, yeah, it was, you know, the morgue or the ME marked him as, you know, accidental overdose, which it's not. There's no different if me and you were having cocktails right now and I poured antifreeze in your drink, you know, we knew we were going to get a little high on alcohol and I poison you, they're going to arrest me and throw me in for murder. I don't understand what the difference could possibly be, because that's
actually a really good analogy. Yeah.
So it's you know, he's poisoned and I never got justice. And, you know, there was evidence on his phone apparently, but it was not pursued. And our state's attorney, Kim Fox, doesn't seem to want to pursue these at all. So this is what we have. It's, as Terry, I'm sure told you, this is now the leading cause of accidental death in 18 to 45. Our life expectancy, all these stats are going to drop. And it just, you don't really see or hear about it. They should be screening it from the rooftops on the media every day.
Yeah, I agree.
But they don't. And even celebrities' kids are dying the same way. And it seems for some reason it should be everywhere, posted on billboards all over the place. It should be, you know, something, maybe, I don't know how they can do this with Snapchat. I mean, Liam got it, you know, Snapchat will deliver, it's like Uber Eats for drugs for your children.
Really?
Oh yeah, Liam, we wouldn't let him drive our cars. So he would just do it. Then they would just meet him. He would tell them where to meet on the block. So
I never thought of that. Like, sorry, go ahead.
One really great case, you know, that should be an example for all our judicial system is the Michael Williams case. I believe it's Michael Williams from The Wire. I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Williams, a phenomenal actor. Died. Died from fentanyl poisoning roughly 2 years ago. And the chief of police, I believe it happened in New York, the chief of police told his detectives, you are to look at this case like this man was shot and killed. We're to treat this case like he was any other homicide. And they did, and they prosecuted the dealer, and he was just recently convicted of that homicide. So, you know, why is that so simple? You know, in some cases, and in others, you know, just, you know, families are just dismissed, and it's heartbreaking. You know, I mean, Laura would call me, you know, on a regular basis in tears, you know, that we couldn't get the detective to respond. We couldn't get the detective to email her. And she's just one of so many, you know. We're not asking you to, you know, recreate the wheel. You know, it's statute is there, the protocol is there, the evidence is there. These are precious lives. These are someone's son and daughter. Investigate these cases like the homicides that they are.
Has your foundation been able to, besides directing calls and emails to the detective, has there been any further developments in that, or is it still nothing?
In mine?
Yeah.
No, case closed.
Well, Terry, weren't you able to get yours reopened?
They shared that Liam went and bought in the open drug market, and they could not identify.
What the hell is an open drug market?
Just someone buying over on the corner, someone selling on the corner. So they correct, Laura. They were indicating that this would be so difficult to identify who the source was because he just went to a corner and bought there and then went home and died. I saw the text messages. I read the text messages. That's false. He did meet someone at a CVS. They pulled his GPS coordinates. I believe they pulled his, was it an Uber, Laura?
Yeah, he took an Uber.
He took an Uber to go and buy. I believe, and it's been a while, but I believe that in the phone conversations with the dealer, that the dealer told him what kind of car he was driving, I believe he even gave an address. Like I said, it's been a while, and I hate to, not know, because every single case is so important, but it is so difficult for me to retain all of that.
Sure.
But I felt as if it was a very strong case, and the Chicago Police Department failed, Laura's family and Liam. And his case was closed. There is a statute of limitations in Illinois. It's 3 years. It can be reopened. The DEA can pick it up. A task force can pick it up, but they won't. I mean, how are we going to get, them to reopen a case when we can't even get them to respond to an email? So it's, and after a while, you get tired, and you have to focus elsewhere. Laura's got 2 other children. Laura was going through a divorce. Laura's an ER nurse. So this shouldn't be our job. This is our traditional job to investigate and prosecute. So Laura's just one of thousands.
Oh, yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, does the foundation have your own set of lawyers, or do you just sort of rely on other lawyers to kind of, how does that work? Do you have a legal team? No. Is it a membership-based organization, or is it just something that you can kind of go through to help with your own situation?
So we do have a membership where we have more private and conversations, discussions amongst families that have lost a loved one, to try to consult, and guide people that direction, because they don't know, they're not the police, they don't, oftentimes they'll say, oh, well, the detective said because the toxicology came back as a multiple drug toxicity, or a combined drug toxicity, because your toxicology came back with so many different drugs. But how can we prove, that what they gave was what killed them? Do your job, investigate. And in Illinois, there is a it's called Illinois versus Near, a case law, and what it states is that they only have to prove that what was given contributed to that person's death. So, illicit drugs, it's kind of like, 2 guys are on the street and they're shooting an individual. How do you know which shot? They're both right. So, and families don't know that. The detective will say, well, it's a combined it's a combined, they've got multiple drugs in their system. So, how do we know that, that's the drug that killed them?
That's
Families don't know about Illinois versus drug causation. This is the drug that caused, that contributed to it. So, this is very easy to dismiss.
Well, we only got a minute or 2 left, and so I want to ask you something, and I don't mean to pressure you to sum it up, because I know it's kind of a big question that I should have asked earlier, but I know that Laura got mad at me the other day because I took a jab at Easter, so I know that religion or spirituality is one way to right, Laura, to deal with, how to contend with these sorts of things. But you as individuals, how do you deal with the anguish? I mean, have you sought therapy? Do you defer to religion?
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, you just deal with it. It's what you're dealt. You have no. It's not like there's a prep class for it. It just hits you, and then you just have to. You feel like dying for a while, but
right.
And I think every person, I think that's why I did what I did, because I felt like, here I am, a Chicago police officer who lost my 18-year-old daughter in Chicago. and Chicago was refusing to investigate, classified her case as non-criminal, and closed it, told me that my daughter made a choice and I should just let it go. So I needed to take what I knew and make sure that families had that support and that guidance to correct them. So I think that, we have moms that are nurses, and so they go out and they pass out Narcan. We have moms that have support groups for families. We have moms that, and dads and brothers and sisters that go out and they go to the high schools and they talk to the kids. So you have to do something with that pain. You have to turn that pain into purpose.
So your activism and the foundation is really how it helps you cope with it by fighting for it. Yeah,
100%.
that makes sense to me. All right, well, it's 8:00, and thank you so much, both of you, for coming on the show and talking about this again. I know that I've been thinking, I welled up several times today. I'm just myself being like, oh my God, this is such a heavy story to talk about, and about the thing that, like you said, it goes against the natural order. That's not supposed to happen. And I've always had like a spot in my heart for moms and mothers, and just the importance of them in any given society, and how the relationship with their children. I'm not trying to undermine fathers, but I mean, there's something very special about a mother. And so again, I am so sorry that this happened. And I want to thank you both for being strong and hanging in there, and for creating this foundation that could hopefully help a lot of other people. On that note, I will bid you adieu, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Laura, next time you're up in the area, let me know. We can maybe hang out.
Sure.
I'd love to see you. Yeah, for
likewise.
sure. Okay,
All
great.
right. Thanks
All
again
right,
for
take
inviting
care,
me.
ladies. Thank you so much. Take care. Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. You too.